Good morning and welcome to Deutschland. This is Neuschwanstein Castle, located in Bavaria, Germany. We will come back to that in a few slides, but I always like to open up with a pretty picture. As I say, welcome to Deutschland, better known to us as Germany. Germany, the land of beer, Oompa music, Lederhosen, sausages, and beer. Lots and lots of beer. Today's presentation will not cover the entire nation of Deutschland or Germany, but we'll focus on that area in the red triangle. We'll start down in Bavaria in the south and move our way all the way up to Bonn and Cologne area. Germany has a population of 82 million people, but it has a problem. It has the lowest birth rate of any nation in the world. In the last census, the population had dropped by over 2 million people. That is why you saw when we had folks migrating out of the Middle East, Germany opened its arms, at least initially, to a lot of refugees. Bluntly, they need those refugees to do the kinds of work in their factories. Unfortunately, some of the right-wing folks in Germany have reappeared, and the refugees are now having problems. I always like to look at faces of folks from the various countries that I present, and these are folks from Deutschland or Germany. Actually, if you look around them, they look like folks you'd see in Carroll County or Maryland. And that is because Maryland has a long German history. As a matter of fact, there still is a church in downtown Baltimore, a Lutheran church, that does their services in both English and in German. The Germans are very, very structured. They also love privacy. That comes down to not only privacy in their homes and their communities, but such things as the internet. They have been one of the main champions of ensuring the internet, particularly that of Microsoft, achieves some security and ensures a degree of privacy. They also are very punctual. If you want to take a train or a plane or a bus, be there on time. Because if that train is scheduled to leave at 8:17 p.m., it will leave at 8:17 p.m. If it's scheduled to arrive someplace at 10:03, it will arrive at 10:03. Global warming. Like most European countries, they have seen and are doing something about global warming. Currently, they have moved off of fossil fuels in generation of their electricity to the point where they are generating 33% of their electricity by renewables. In the coming years, you're going to see cars coming out of Germany from BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen that are not going to be fueled by gasoline. They are quickly moving to electric-powered cars. Most Germans live in urban areas, but they adore their forests. Their forests comprise 31% of the nation, and they take care of those forests. If you've ever had the opportunity to walk in them, you would also know that they are pristine. I always joke that if a limb falls off of a branch, the forest meister there is there to catch it. You don't see trash, you don't see limbs on the ground. They are almost manicured in the forests. Whether you're in an urban area or in the forest area, there is a problem still in Germany. The Allies dropped tons of bombs. On the average, over 5,000 bombs a year are found and disarmed in Germany. So if you hear some sirens and you see signs saying bombs, stay away. Traditional dress. The couple on the left are in the traditional dress of the Black Forest, which we'll visit in a little while. The folks on the couple on the right are dressed in traditional Bavarian dress. Note the Lederhosen. We're going to start our journey today in Bavaria. At least that's what we call it. If you look on a German map, the English map is to the left, the German map is to the right. It's called Bern. You also notice below Bern, probably in small print, you may not be able to see on the TV. There's a place called München. We call it Munich. Anyway, we're going to start in Bavaria. And we're going to start the southern part, almost on the border with Austria. This is a nice pastoral type scene. It is very common to see this part in the southern part of Bavaria. Sometimes people, when they see these pictures, they think, well, this must be Switzerland. Well, yes, could be Switzerland, but no, it's still Bavaria and the German Alps. The buildings that you see in the various fields, particularly in the right picture, are, as they go up the hills, are for the animals. They tend to have the animals go up into pasture land during the summer and bring them down. While it's starting to decrease, but a lot of the farmers during the winter would keep their animals underneath their houses for two reasons. One, keep the animals warm during the winter, but the heat of the animals also heated their houses. We're at the base of the lane that goes up, or the road that goes up to Neuschwanstein Castle. And these are horse-drawn carts that tourists can take to go up to the castle. It's a pretty steep walk up the hill. I've got to tell you an embarrassing story. When Carol and I were in our 20s, early 20s, and we went to Neuschwanstein Castle for the first time, we got in one of these carts. Well, the gentleman that was the driver, leader, whatever you want to call him, of the cart, didn't get in the cart. He walked up the hill. He was probably in his late 70s to early 80s. That embarrassed us. So much so that when we came back down, we walked down. This is another picture on the left of Neuschwanstein Castle. We'll go in it in just a minute, but I wanted to compare and contrast to the castle on the right. Those of you that have been to Disneyland, whether it be in Orlando or out in Orange County, California, or elsewhere, France, Japan, and yes, Singapore, you'll see a castle. It's known as the castle, and that's the main thing on each of Disneyland. Well, it's not quite, but Walt Disney, with a little bit of license, loved Neuschwanstein Castle. He built his castles looking like it. This is inside Neuschwanstein. The castle was built by a gentleman they call Mad King Ludwig. Unfortunately, he did not spend a lot of time in there. 7 days after he moved in, he died of natural causes. But look at what he had built. As with many of these places in Europe, I just marvel at the architecture and the ability to build these castles. They didn't have the modern devices and tools we have today, but look what they were able to achieve. In the traditional things of Bavaria, you also see a lot of paintings on the walls. They may be a little bit hard to see on the TV, but they're in the lower left and the upper right, as well as that corridor you can see in the bottom right picture. As I said, Ludwig only spent 7 days in Neuschwanstein. He spent most of his time in another castle, which is located not too far away, called Linderhof. And I love this castle because I love engineering. It was built in 1857, but it had natural air conditioning. If you look behind the white building, which is the castle, and up the hill, you'll see stair steps. That's not for walking. Water flows down from a spring, a little building up on the top that's a little hard to see, but it's because it's dark in the picture. But water flows down, and then it flows through various ducts in the house and provides natural air conditioning. You might say, well, I've seen that picture before on the right. Well, in Neuschwanstein, he had the same bedroom built in Neuschwanstein that he had in Lindenhof Castle. We now move into a town on both pictures, but you can see it on the bottom picture. This is Garmisch. Garmisch, if you knew anybody that was in the U.S. military, and we had close to 300,000 people in the U.S. military in Europe up until the early 1990s. They, in all likelihood, came to Garmisch because it was a U.S. military recreation center. Garmisch is a traditional Bavarian town. You can see they tend to whitewash the buildings and then put beautiful paintings or decorations on the outside. They love their flowers. They love to put them in window boxes. But you can also see the artwork that they do. Again, this is very, very traditional to Bavaria. You can look at the cars and you'll see a lot of American cars in this picture because this is one of the wreck hotels. There were 7 of them in Bavaria, in town, and you could stay there. We stayed there in 1968 for $5 a night. Each of the hotels had great restaurants, and you could go around between restaurants and have all sorts of meals. One of the hotels even had a skating rink where there was an ice show every night. This is the top of the Zugspitze. There is a cable car that you can take there if you've got the guts of hanging on this cable car as you go up and up and up to the top. But I'll tell you, if it's raining in downtown Garmisch, I can guarantee you it will be snowing on top of the Zugspitze. We leave Garmisch and we head north, going up towards Munich or München. As we do, we're going to pass a couple of villages. This is a traditional Bavarian village with its local church. This one happens to be a Lutheran church. This is another village heading north, and it is a Catholic church. Bavaria tends to be more Catholic than it is Lutheran. You find more Lutheran churches in central and northern Germany. Another village that you may have heard of, this is Oberammergau. It sits in the foothills of the Alps, and it's famous for its Passion Play, which I'll talk about in a minute. But one of the things in those mountains that many people, even tourists going to Oberammergau, do not know is the Nazis were developing jet engines in the latter part of World War II. And they built caves in those mountains to not only test, but to build the engines. They built them in caves because they did not want the Allies being able to bomb them. Oberammergau is famous for its Passion Play. It has done this Passion Play every 10 years since 1640. Why did they do this Passion Play? They do it because in 1640, or prior to 1640, the town was almost devastated with the bubonic plague. And they promised God that they will do the play every 10 years. And with the exception of World War II, they have done it every 10 years. The villagers do all the parts. They don't have outside actors coming in. They rehearse for almost a year prior to the start of the play. The play was scheduled to start this year in 2020 and do 120 shows over a 5-month period. But due to the virus, the plays have been canceled. There is no indication whether they'll wait until 2030 or they will do it next year. But if you go to Oberammergau in the year when the play is not going, it is a delightful little village to go to. People tend to make their living as farmers. There are lots of nice pasture lands outside of Oberammergau, but it is also a place of a number of whittlers, carvers, and they produce some of the most amazing statues out of wood. And if you came to our house, you'll find a couple. But if you wake up in the morning, say you're staying at one of the local hotels or guest houses, and you get up early in the morning and start walking into town, you'll hear bells. They're cow bells as the cattle leave their barns and walk up the mountains into the pastures. It is such a delightful thing. It's almost like the Sound of Music type situation. I am very familiar with Oberammergau. It is also a location of a NATO school. And as you might know from previous presentations, I was privileged to represent the United States and NATO in Brussels. This is a school that does many, many things. It indoctrinates new officers that are going to serve in NATO positions, but it also, after the fall in 1989 of the Berlin Wall and many nations wanting to join NATO, it was a school where we taught them about how to implement democracy, how to conduct elections, how to have political parties, how to revise their legal system. This all occurred in these buildings here, as well as some great discussions, because that's what it's all about. It's not always just about lecture. It's about an exchange of ideas. We now go a little further east from Oberammergau to a town called Berchtesgaden, a lovely village that has had to overcome a difficult past. Prior to World War II, Hitler made his home in this village, and this is where he began his political career. When he rose to power, he had a unique house built very close to the village. It is called the Eagle's Nest. It's built on the third highest mountain in Germany. And in 1939, it cost $15 million to build. During the war, the Allies tried numerous times to bomb it when they thought he was there. They never succeeded. The top right picture is the interior of the Eagle's Nest. The bottom is a picture taken from shortly after U.S. forces captured the Eagle's Nest, and they also captured some of Hitler's liquor. We now move north to Munich or München. If you can look at the top of the picture, you'll see it's not far from the German Alps. Many people that live in Munich have places down near the Alps, or they go there on weekends to get away from the big city. This building here in the right forefront is the City Hall. The circle is a large cuckoo clock. It's famous for its moving figures that move and do different things depending upon the hour. Munich is famous for beer. There are lots of breweries in Munich, and a number of them have beer halls that are open all year round. And they're usually filled with tourists. But the big thing is in September, known as Oktoberfest. The picture to the right is an aerial picture of the park where the Oktoberfest occurs. Those buildings in white and one in green are tents. Those tents are in the lower right. One of those tents is on the lower right. They are each a different brewery. And in them, you can go in and you can sit and naturally have beer. But you can also have roasted chicken. You can have wursts, which are like Frankfurter type things, or other desserts. But the big thing in the center, and you'll see another picture in a minute, is usually a band playing oom-pa-pa music. Back to the beer. That is not a picture that has been altered. Those women, and my wife can attest to it because she's been there with me, carry those number of beer mugs around when they're serving. It is amazing. They have strong arms. Go back to the left picture though. It has a very sad memory for me. I once went to Oktoberfest, and it lasts until about 11:30 at night, and then all the tents empty out. And if you look in between those tents, is like a main walk area going out, and there's a gate out to the left, and there's a gate to the right. Some colleagues and myself had left one of the tents, and we were starting to walk out. And it was during a period in the late 80s when there were terrorism and bombings going on in Germany. And as we started to walk, 2 major bombs went off and killed several people leaving the Oktoberfest. That has always been a sad thing when I look at this picture. This is the interior of one of those tents. Again, this is one of the beer, Lowenbrau, you've probably heard of it, that's imported into the United States. And you get to sit with some of your closest friends. There is a nice little deal. We were at a meeting, a meeting of NATO nations that was occurring in the September timeframe. And we got to go to one of the tents and be sponsored by Lowenbrau. They invited the gentleman at the time that was the director of the organization up, and he got to conduct the band. He was pretty drunk by the time he got up there. We now move westward from Munich to a town where it's Christmas all year long, Rottenburg. I don't know why they tend to build houses or towns up on hills, but this one is up on top of a hill. And there are lots of shops all year round selling you Christmas goods. But it's also a beautiful little building, set of buildings in town. Love the architecture, love the narrow streets. And it's truly, for me, a fairy tale town. Once again, we're in late November, and across Germany, over 2,500 what's called Christkindl marts open up. They are marts that sell everything under the sun, but mostly Christmas items. They sell clothes, traditional food, but one of the main things they sell is Glühwein. It's a mulled wine with spices that is served steaming hot. Just perfect to keep you warm, but if you have enough of them, it opens your wallets. Apologize for the fuzziness of the picture, but this is a vendor selling things at one of the Christkindl marts. Those things with little windmills up on top to the left are carousels. And you can see that they're candles around the outside. And when you light the candles, hot air rises and it turns those propellers. And as it does, within the carousel, things move around, little statues. Again, hand carved. They're very expensive if they're hand carved. They're beautiful. If you come to our house at Christmas, you'll see one. Thinking about Glühwein, I have to think about food. Picture in the upper left is of sauerbraten and cabbage and potato dumplings. I hate to say it, I don't know how watermelon snuck its way in there in this picture, but it's there. Sauerbraten is great. Sometimes it's good here. Sometimes it's not. The picture in the center is the hamburger of Germany. It's a wurst, or sausage, called currywurst. It's hot. It's great, particularly in the winter. As McDonald's used to say, they serve millions and millions, well, millions and millions of currywursts are served. My son went to school while we lived in Brussels, in Augsburg, Germany, and I think he survived off of currywurst. The picture to the right is schnitzel. Again, you know, it's a veal type dish that's fried. The coating is wonderful. And the red cabbage to the right is also wonderful. Lower left. Yes, you'll get something that big on your plate if you go into a restaurant and you order a hammock. One of the things in Germany, the waiters get very upset if you don't eat everything that's on your plate. they consider it that you didn't like the meal, and they'll keep asking you, why didn't you finish? So if you order a ham hock, you're going to have a big meal and a full stomach. The picture in the lower center is roasted chicken. If you go up into Pennsylvania, you can find roasted chickens. The picture all the way to the right is white asparagus. And my wife will tell you that I'm not a lover of asparagus, but I love white asparagus. It has a totally different taste, and particularly if you put something like hollandaise sauce on top of it, it's great. If you know somebody that grew up in Germany and you ask them, is there anything they miss? They'll say two things, usually. Bread. You can go to Germany and go into various bakeries, and there are over 300 different types of bread. I think Carol and I tried to get to that number, but never succeeded. The other thing that they will tell you about Germany is they miss the clean streets. You don't find trash in the streets. They are extremely clean. Can't go past food without talking about dessert. The dessert in the upper left is Black Forest cake. Upper right, you could guess it, it is a carrot cake. Not these big carrot cakes, but it's only about maybe 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches high. The picture in the lower left looks like spaghetti. It's not. It is strained ice cream to look like spaghetti noodles. And that's not tomato sauce on top of it, it's a raspberry sauce. This you will find not in your average restaurant, but in your high-end restaurants, and the Germans love it. The picture to the right with the blue background is Stollen. It's made with a little bit of liquor and raisins and nuts and other things with lots of powdered sugar on it. I love Stollen. You can get a pretty good Stollen here in the United States. If you go to Wegmans, supermarkets, they sell them in November and December. We move from Bavaria to another state area called Baden and Württemberg. We're going to look at Stuttgart, and then down in Freiburg, which is the Black Forest area, and then we're going to come on up north. We begin in Stuttgart. The picture to the left is what Stuttgart looked like after World War II. It was an industrial center for the Germans, and so the Allies destroyed it in their bombing. The picture to the right is Stuttgart today. Stuttgart is a town that I have spent a lot of time in. I mentioned that I was in NATO in Brussels, but I also had U.S. military responsibilities, and as such I had an office in Stuttgart. There was a place called Patch Army Barracks. And so I would come down there for weeks at a time to do my U.S. business. Stuttgart is the headquarters and main production of Mercedes cars. When I would come to Stuttgart, I would stay in a hotel right near this facility called the Hotel Berlin. It almost became my second home. But I was always amazed at this factory. In the upper right, you'll see two Germans working, assembling a Mercedes. That is not a true picture. The Germans tend to be the supervisors. They do not do the manual labor. The manual labor is done by people that they bring in from North Africa and Turkey. They bring them in and put them in barracks for up to 18 months. They earn fairly good money compared to what they could earn in their home countries. The Mercedes provides them housing and meals. So they can send most of their money back to their home countries, supporting their families, but a lot of them are able to save money and go back home and open their own businesses. As Mercedes moves more towards automation, such as you see in the right picture, those immigrants coming in for 18 months are becoming less and less. Germany needed to go more towards automation because it does not have a population that wants to do the kind of work required of manual labor. We move west and a little bit south. This picture I put in is because we're in the Black Forest, a very dense forest, lots of fairy tales that came out of the Black Forest. It's also the home of hand-carved cuckoo clocks. I got a warning. If you were to go to Germany, be unlikely that you would buy a hand-carved cuckoo clock made in Bavaria, in the Black Forests. Most of them sold in Germany today were made in China. As I say, 31% of the country is forest, and there's lots of open fields. Again, because the Germans tend to live in the large cities or urban areas. I look at this picture and I just want to lay out there in that field. If you haven't realized it thus far, like a lot of other Europeans, the Germans love flowers, and they love very, very pretty architecture of their houses and buildings. This depiction shows the Rhine River, which I've talked about before in previous presentations. It starts in Switzerland, winds its way up, mostly through Germany, and then into the Netherlands. Many folks here at COV have told me that they've taken cruises on the Rhine, and that is a very enjoyable experience. We're going to head up river now to Heidelberg. This is Heidelberg, the big castle up there on the hill behind the city. It is a city, again, if you had folks in the U.S. military, particularly through the 50s, from 1950 through 1990. This was the headquarters of the U.S. Army in Europe. As such, this place was overrun with Americans, American cars. I swear at times, for every 5 cars you'd see in town, you'd only see 1 German. And that is no longer the case. The U.S. forces have moved out of Europe. Most places, as they used to call them, concerns, are now empty and have been turned back over to the German government. This is one of the main shopping walkways, cobblestone walkway. It actually leads up to the castle. Used to walk it, and it was shops that really had goods that they were trying to sell to the Americans stationed there. That is no longer the case. The shops now cater to German and other tourists. If you had somebody living in the Heidelberg area, there were several villages, and they had these apartments that look like this. They got a nickname. They were called staircase living, because you had your apartment, but the only way you could socialize with your neighbor was out in the steps. There weren't elevators. There were just steps to go up. And people would congregate on the staircase landings to have discussions, sometimes parties. We now move further west to a base that is still active in Germany, and it is extremely important to the United States. It's called Ramstein Air Force Base. I was never stationed there, but when I'd go to Stuttgart, I'd stop here because they had a better PX and commissary than we had in Belgium, and so I would Carol would have a list and I'd pick up things. But I want to call your attention to that large plane in the upper left, right corner picture. That is a C-5A. When Carol and I lived in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, we would see these planes every day. That's because they're operated by the West Virginia Air National Guard. They would fly from Martinsburg, West Virginia, over to Dover, pick up cargo, and take it to Frankfurt. The smaller planes on either side and the one on the taxi lane down there are the ones that would fly from Stuttgart into Iraq, Afghanistan, and other parts of the Middle East. This was the main corridor of supply coming into Europe. When we hear people say we need to get all of our people out of Europe, you do so at a peril of lives and being able to support our troops worldwide, because that's what Ramstein does. One of the sad things at Ramstein, the planes may go out with supplies, but they come back with the wounded. They come back to Ramstein and go to an army hospital called Landstuhl, which is near the airport. Picture in the lower right shows you the complex size. We all know about shock trauma at the University of Maryland in downtown Baltimore. This is shock trauma on steroids. It is thanks to the technical competency of the surgeons and nurses and other aides that so many of our troops live and are not brought home in body bags. This hospital has been around for a long while. And I put this picture in because it's a picture of the hospital back in the 1950s. In the late 50s, a gentleman that many of you know, George Thomas, served at this hospital. I dearly loved George. He was a neighbor. He was a friend to everybody on this campus. And so when I do this presentation, I always like to show this picture and remember him. We move up the Rhine. This is not the Rhine, but it's a river that flows into the Rhine. And this is Frankfurt. Well, the Rhine doesn't have ocean-going vessels. It is the headquarters of many companies that do worldwide trading. Germany, 82 million people, has the fourth largest economy in the world, and it is driven by trade. It is also the financial capital of Europe and the European Union. Picture in the lower left, the central bank of the European Union is located there. The Bourse, or the DAX, is equivalent to Wall Street here in the United States. Although ships don't come up to Frankfurt, many of the companies that own the ships and the trade going on those ships are located in Frankfurt. This is the old part of Frankfurt, getting more towards Central Europe, Germany, or European architecture. Always notice the flowers. Flowers everywhere. Gotta have flowers, guys. Most of those awnings and things are restaurants where you can sit out. Europeans love to sit out in the plazas and have a meal. This is a building which I'm very familiar. And it's an example of going from missiles and guns to plowshares and peace. During World War II, this was the headquarters of the IG Farben companies. They were the main suppliers of bombs and bullets and all sorts of other things for Hitler and his war. It's interesting, Eisenhower decreed that this building should not be bombed. Because after World War II, and for many, many years after, it became the headquarters for the U.S. Army 7th Corps. Today, it is no longer a military building. It is a university dedicated to teaching peace. The building has a unique elevator system, almost like boxes. The picture to the right you see is a couple holding on. These boxes continually move up and down. They do not stop at a floor. You jump on to get into the box. It goes up. When you get to your floor, you jump off. I don't think this would work here at CLV. Transportation. I always marvel at the German transportation system, whether that be airports, trains, or cars. This is the Frankfurt International Airport. If you look to the right, that's where the commercial operation is. And up until about 7 years ago, onto the left of the runways, that used to be Rhine U.S. Air Force Base. Again, from the 50s through about the mid-90s, for U.S. forces going into Europe, this is where they flew into. This is the gateway. Today they go into Ramstein. This base was established in 1945 and was the key for American support to Europe. During 1949, you might remember the Berlin blockade. There were over 50 C-118 aircraft that were based here at that time that flew supplies to Berlin. In the 60s, I had the privilege of flying on several of those C-118s. This is the interior of Frankfurt Airport. Doesn't look much different than, say, BWI or some other airport. It's the 5th busiest airport in the world. And I hate to tell you, I know every inch of it. There was one time where I was trapped in it for 3 days because I couldn't get a flight out. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. it's very efficient, particularly from a transport standpoint. If you looked in the middle of the picture, it's hard to see just where this red banner is. That's where you would come off of the aircraft, come out of customs, so on and so forth. If you come out and you go up that escalator, up towards where it says Food Plaza, and go out to the right, you can get a bus or a taxi to take you anywhere in the local area. But if you didn't go up that escalator, you go down the one that's here in the forefront of the picture, you come to what they call the U-Bahn, which is their subway, which will take you all over the Frankfurt area. If you go down to that floor and then you take another escalator down, you will come to where the train station is. Train station with high-speed trains going throughout Germany, going to Paris, going to Switzerland, and so forth. You can get anywhere in Germany without stepping outside of the airport building. Also, you saw it's a food hall. They've got several movies in there, all sorts of stores. As I say, I found every one of them in the 3 days I was stuck there. These are some of their trains. Picture on the right is one of the local trains. If you want to go from the airport down to, say, Heidelberg or up to Cologne, you might take one of those. But you're more likely to take the ICE train, ICE. It's a high-speed train doing 165 miles an hour. That would, if I was going up to Cologne, I would probably take that, or if I was going to Brussels, or I was going to northern Germany, or if I was going to Paris. The train in the lower right is actually a surface trolley, and it will go from Frankfurt Airport to various locations in the general area. I mentioned the U-Bahn. That's the green train or subway in the right. Notice the very clean subway station. Autobahns. We've heard about Autobahns. High speed. Well, for the most part, they still are. They are about 75% of the Autobahn are, the speed limit is unlimited. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. The police won't come after you if you're doing 100 miles an hour. But if you go over 120 kilometers, which is about 68 miles an hour, and you have an accident, and it's your fault, your insurance company will not pay off. That's a slight incentive. People still go fast on the Autobahns, and when there are accidents, they are horrendous. Autobahns are a marvel. They were started by Hitler. Unlike ours, where we have to repair them all the time, you cannot afford to be going 100, 120 miles an hour. I hate to tell you, I've done that, on an Autobahn and hit a bump or a crack or whatever. The roads must be able to support those kind of speeds. The way they're built, that is cement, is not 4 or 5 inches thick like we do. It's 2 feet plus thick, and there is 3 feet of gravel below it. That is why during the Cold War, parts of the Autobahn, the big secret that wasn't much of a big secret, were built so that our fighters could land on there. And believe it or not, gas stations along the Autobahn had aviation fuel, so those planes could be refueled in case there was an attack by the Russians. One of the neat things in Germany, their speed signs are electronically controlled. That 120 is saying 120 kilometers an hour. And if there are accidents or weather conditions, they change those speed limits. It's very expensive, over $2,000 to get a driver's license in Germany. First of all, you have to attend a mandatory 8-hour first aid course. And that's because if you are the first person to come upon an accident, you must stop and render first aid. Therefore, everybody needs to have a first aid kit in their car. Second of all, you must undergo classroom instruction of a minimum of 37 hours, and that instruction is only taught by government certified instructors. Then you need to pass 2 exams, and they're not guess exams, written answers. Then you need to take your driving test. And there's 3 parts to the driving test. 1, in urban or city driving. Then out in the countryside, separate test. And then finally, driving on the Autobahn. If you fail any of those, you go back for more instruction. This is what you need to have in your car: the first aid kit, a warning sign, a fire extinguisher, and a vest for when you get out of the car to render aid. I unfortunately had a situation where I was the first car upon a scene of a motorcycle accident. I couldn't render aid because the guy and the girl that were on the motorcycle both died. Driving on the Autobahn requires the police to have some fancy and very powerful cars. And if you think you can outrun them, you can't. Back to the Rhine. We've been down in the lower part of the Rhine in Hamburg, and then we've been up into Frankfurt. We're going to go up river headed toward Cologne and Bavaria. Pennsylvania has their great horseshoe turn for a train. This is the horseshoe turn on the Rhine River. Those of you that have taken a Rhine cruise have probably seen that. I can't tell you the number of times I've driven along the road that parallels the Rhine. As we move up the Rhine, it is very, very scenic, and you start to see the vineyards. Rhine wine. Lots of little towns with these vineyards that are grown on the hillside. Talked about it in my presentation on the Netherlands. Have these barges that come up from Rotterdam. This happens to be a coal barge, but it could be any other cargo. But the reason I wanted to point it out was their families come on board. And the family will live in those cabins below the car. There are schools. We're now doing teaching here at our kids at home. For years, the Germans have been doing teaching on these barges by television to the students that live with their families. Please also note there's a car on top of that cabin. That's because when they get to their destination, that little gray winch in the back, they just lift the car off and they can go off driving in the countryside or to do whatever shopping they need to do. This is Remagen. It is a bridge that lives in infamy. When the Allies reached the Rhine River, there was only one bridge standing, and it was this bridge here, the one you see falling in the water on the left, and the two pillars to the right. When they got there, the bridge stood for 16 days. It was enough time to get the troops across the river to continue the offensive, and it resulted in shortening the war. The picture on the left is on the 17th day when the bridge collapsed. Sure, you recognize this as a German Shepherd. I put it in here because I have a little story. For many years, even before I went to NATO, I used to go to Bonn, Germany, and a little village outside of Bonn, and go to a German facility which we had relationships with. There was one evening where a colleague of mine and myself, we were working all day trying to get an electronic system up to work, and we were having problems with the software. I made a call back to the United States, and they said, oh yeah, we've got to do a patch on the software to make it work with the German system. Well, it came 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the Germans wanted to go home. They're punctual in many ways. They said, no problem. You can stay in the office, and the telephones are yours, and so on and so forth, and when you get it patched and working again, what you need to do is call to the front gate. And it's important that you call to the front gate before you go to leave. And that is because the building was protected by 22 German shepherds who would attack anybody that walked in the hallways or out the doors. My German colleague said, but don't worry, if you forget and go outside, the dogs have been trained to not attack unless you move. So if you stand still, they will bark, and that will alert the guards to come and get the dogs. I thought that over many times and have thought about it many more times. There's no way you have a German Shepherd running at you and you're going to stand still. So needless to say, I called the guards and I asked them many, many times, did you count? Did you get all of the dogs before I walked out of that building? In the United States, we have our Pentagon. This is the Ministry of Defense. It's located in Bonn, Germany. It's the equivalent of our Pentagon. A little bit more modern looking. It's built a lot more recently. Remember, the Pentagon was built in 18 months during World War II. The lady on the right is the Minister of Defense. She is a rising politician in the German government and is likely to succeed Angela Merkel whenever Andrea decides to step down. We move further up the Rhine to Cologne. We spell it, with a C-O-L. It's spelled with a K-O-L-N in German. This was another city that was totally bombed. It's a city that's come back. But it's a city like Washington. I used to hate driving in it because it didn't have good roads going in and out of town. And I always got lost. I know it well because we used to drop our son off when he was going back to university in Augsburg at the train station, which is near the river. The picture in the lower right is of the cathedral in Bonn. You can see it in the lower left. It's a dark looking structure there. That whole area and all those bridges were totally bombed, including the train station, which is right behind the cathedral. The Allies did not, on purpose, On purpose, they did not bomb it. However, one bomb did go astray and there was some slight damage to the cathedral. This is what it looked like after Allied bombing. This is what it looks like today. At forefront is where one of those Kris Kringle marts happen each year, and it's one that I like to go to. Yes, this is a map of Belgium. Germany is over to the right, and Luxembourg down to the gray. I wanted to show you, because this is a good shot, of the Ardennes. Ardennes is where the Battle of the Bulge occurred. But it's also a place that Carol and I know very well. There's a little village settled down in a valley. It's called Monschau. Carol and I used to go there very frequently, and when we had visitors, we would take them there. But again, this is a place that in history troubles me. It was the place where the Battle of the Bulge was orchestrated. The German military controlled its forces in the Ardennes going along the Battle of the Bulge. But it's a great little town to go to today. That white building to the right is a bakery, or bakery as they call it. I always find the bakeries, by the way. Great bread, great bread. And a little stream that goes through it. Has lots of tourists. Again, it has a great mart in November, Kris Kringle Mart. But it's a town of, besides tourists, it is a town where they do a lot of glass blowing. And up the hill from where this picture is taken is a very nice shop and museum of glass blowing. I love the Central European architecture, or Central Germany architecture of this town, with the stream going by it and the flower baskets. They don't need watering, they get enough moisture from that stream coming. I don't know why, but I put this in. This is a Volkswagen. You might recognize it. 22 million of them are sold. That is my Volkswagen. I bought for $1,250 brand new and traveled the length of Europe in it. Time has come to say goodbye, or Wiedersehen. Love this for these little kids in the field in Bavaria. I thank you for watching the presentations every week. I thank everybody in the healthcare center, the staff. They are doing a fantastic job, and we cannot, every week I want to say thank you to them. Next week I'll have another presentation. I hope you're enjoying them. I have had some very nice compliments from people. It's a question for me because I sit at my desk doing these recordings. I have no idea whether anybody is watching them, but if there's only one person that is enjoying them, I am glad that I'm doing it, and I hope that you're enjoying them. Thank you, have a good week, and I'll see you next week.